Forget how hard that is. Oh, friends. So, I'm encountering people in our congregation this past week, 2 weeks, few weeks, and I'm noticing when I encounter some of you folks beyond our tent, just how much hurt people are feeling. It feels for so many of us that pieces of the world are kind of coming apart. And there doesn't seem to be anybody talking to each other in meaningful, serious ways. And so, lots of folks are feeling hurt and wounded and confused, and we want to hide. And I want to hide, but I can't. I can't, and I'm not letting you off the hook either. We can't. And this Torah portion is kind of getting me very activated. The Torah portion is called Korach. And Korach is this leader, and he's family with Moses and Aaron, and he has power, and he has influence. And Korach, the Torah portion is named for him, even though the Torah kind of presents him a little bit like a villain. Not a little bit. Actually, totally. And there are some people in our commentators who are going to come to his defense. And I think that's amazing and it's important because we get to have lots of conversations about it. But there's this guy, Korach, who is challenging the leadership of Moses and Aaron not long after they got out of Egypt. So everything that has happened up until this point, like liberation from Egypt, plagues, Sinai, for Korach and his followers, it's not enough. They feel that Korach could do a better job. And Korach is going to publicly challenge and humiliate Moses and Aaron. Now, Korach isn't alone in this. He has a couple of other folks, Dotan and Aviram, and then there are 250 elders. So there is a very strong grouping of elders, of people with some status back then, who are all joining along and challenging that they have an equal right to lead. And Moses isn't good enough. He's not watching out in your interest, folks. This is what Korach is telling the people. You see why I'm getting agitated? Moses responds by telling Korach and the others who are part of this band to bring fire pans. Now, fire pans is just a tool for ancient sacrifices, right? They would light fires and incense, and they would invoke God's presence. And so Moses is telling Korach and these 250 plus other people, let's bring out these fire pans. We're going to put incense, and we're going to see who's going to work. Who is God going to choose and make a fire without them lighting it, and we'll see what happens. And to this point, the only characters mentioned in this text is Moses, Aaron, Korach, Dotan, Aviram, and the elders. But we know that there's a whole lot of other people. The people, according to the text, we don't hear their voice. It seems as if they're not involved. But there's going to be that hour when the fire pan competition actually starts. And that moment is going to be significant. This test in this competition arrives. Korach gathers his band and his people, his followers, to meet him at this event. And he turns his attempted revolt and challenge to Moses and Aaron and their authority. It moves from a revolt to a revolution. The text makes it clear that the congregation, the people, the community, they have no voice, and so one would think no role, no part to play when this happens. But here in the text, they are going to be called forward to witness. Called forward by Korach to witness what's going to happen. And then God speaks to Moses and says, stand back from this community, from all of the people of Israel at this point. Stand back from them because I'm going to annihilate them in an instant. So God clearly is pissed. Right. Sorry for the language. I'll use better. Now, in response to all of this, Moses and Aaron are going to fall on their faces. They are going to experience tremendous humility. And Moses and Aaron are going to plead with God. And they're going to say, God, source of the breath of all flesh, when one person sins, will you be wrathful with the whole community? With the whole community. Because of Korach and a few people, a couple of hundred out of all of those thousands and thousands, some say millions. Are you going to be that wrathful? And apparently God listens and reconsiders. And God tells them, all of these Israelites, to withdraw from the realms of Korach. Okay, it's a very straightforward teaching from the text. But here's the question. Here's the question. This is where it gets interesting. Why does God want to destroy an entire nation? What did everybody do that might be worthy? Is it portraying God as petty? That if not everybody's going to be in, then nobody can be a part of that? I can't buy into that. I don't believe it's true. That doesn't work for me. So what is it that the people do that makes God say, I'm going to annihilate all of them? And of course doesn't. Well, the commentators of old are just as puzzled by this. They're frustrated and concerned, wondering why would God make such a threat to these people that God just brought out of Egypt? And they say that Moses misinterpreted God's original command. By community, it wasn't meaning everybody, the entire people of Israel. It was just meaning God was just talking about the rebels, just the people that wanted to unseat Moses and Aaron. Maybe still doesn't do it for me. I need something a little bit more powerful, because that's just a word play. But the Malbim is one of these significant sages of yesteryear, our Meforshim. The Malbim argues that God originally did intend to destroy the entire nation because they were guilty of a very significant sin. And this is what the Malbim said. The Malbim said they had committed the sin of fence straddling. The sin of indifference. It was for this that God wanted to destroy them, for not taking a stand against evil. Korach wanted to unseat Moses and Aaron from their leadership positions, even though God's own self chose them because they had unique and special qualities. And the people needed them, and Korach comes along and says, I could do better. I won it. And I'm going to figure out how to take on this leadership. God is so angry, is threatening to destroy everyone and doesn't. But the Malbim says their sin wasn't for taking a side. Their sin was for not doing anything. It doesn't suggest that the people supported Korach, but they didn't oppose him either. Not clearly. If Moses should win, they'd continue to work for him. If Korach would win, they would have worked for Korach. So why does God free and enslave people who have been oppressed and abused by a Pharaoh in order just to make way for the potential of another Pharaoh. The sin is fence straddling, folks. And they saw their community threatened, but they didn't get involved. They became bystanders. Moses maybe didn't understand this at first. He protested. It says in the text, but God, they haven't done anything. And God responds, that's exactly the point. They haven't done anything. They haven't done anything. Let them stand back from Korach and Dotan and Aviram. And if they want to be saved, let them disassociate themselves from the evil that is around them. Folks, there's a message that's more enduring than this one. Evil and the pain that people experience exists because we too often sit back and watch or turn the other way. Now, this isn't for you to say how terrible any of us are. I think to some degree, this is something that's confronted by a lot of people. But silence has never been something that the Jewish people have been able to afford. And when others would be silent, or when others are silent, when we have to confront anti-Semitism rising again and again and again, we can't raise up and say, why are you silent, if we're going to just turn the page. So, we have some work to do. And I know we're worried about saying that something or behaviors aren't kosher. We don't want to get into a fight. We don't want to get into an argument. We don't want to lose friends. We don't want to. But I will say again, I think we have to be more impatient with finding justice in our world. The only way to prevent ourselves in our world from falling prey to that kind of evil that Korach was bringing is when others propose to do nothing. But I don't think that's really the values that we experience within Jewish life or tradition. It's hard. And I'm not saying to start a fight. I know some of you are, by the way, and I'm not saying that we should start a fight. What I'm saying is we have to encounter other people's humanity and figure out how are we going to build something meaningful together. There's no other way. The rabbis will say if people are arguing, there has to be some sort of a benefit. We have to argue in the spirit of Hillel and Shammai, right? Talmudic scholars, or scholars in the Talmud rather, who are always arguing, and one of them almost always wins every single argument. Hillel always wins, which for Shammai must have been annoying. And yet, they loved each other. And their students connected with one another. And they were a united people. And the Mishnah says, when you have an argument, it should be an argument like Hillel and Shammai, not like Korach. Not, they say, like Korach. There was no purpose for that argument. There was no purpose. It was just to attain power, according to their interpretation. So, thank God Cantor Avery is here so that, she can help us figure out the path on how we need to do our parts. Not to fix it all, but just to do our parts. So we have something to think about this Shabbat. Let's move toward our conclusion, yeah? 500